Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Young, and I am a professional astrologer, and I'm going to be doing the cosmic weather for March. And it's going to be an interesting month because we're going to have two significant retrogrades in effect. The first one will be Venus, actually, which will go retrograde on March the 3rd. And then the second one will be Mercury, which will go retrograde on March the 16th. So Mercury retrogrades three times a year, and so this will be the first retrograde, and it will occur in Aries. Venus retrogrades every 2 years, and it will also start its retrograde in Aries. So there's going to be a very important shift of energy starting quickly this month, where Venus, by being retrograde, is going to ask of us to be patient in our relationships while also trying to be very direct in our relationships. It's kind of an interesting combination. Venus has a little bit of a challenge by being in Aries. And so that coupled with the retrograde energy is definitely going to make it interesting in terms of what we'll be dealing with regard to relationships. And not only that, but because of the retrograde, Venus and Mercury will work their way back into Pisces. They're going to start their retrograde at the very front end of Aries degrees, and then they're going to work their way back. So, what I can honestly say is that we'll be looking at, again, sort of revelation from Aries in terms of relationships and knowledge and information, and then a need to process it or review it or kind of work through what it means for us in terms of the things that we're observing from an Aries standpoint, which is what's being shown to me. And then when these both get back into Pisces, there'll sort of be an energy of, well, what does this mean for me on an emotional, spiritual type of level? And there could be a lot of shifting going on because all in all, things are just very up in the air. The previous videos that I've done, if you go back and decide to check any of those out in terms of each of those months, the consistent thing that's showing up across the board are the transits involving the outer points, which are moving slowly, but they're also transitioning this year. So a lot of what you'll see if you take a look at other videos about what's going on astrologically that dig a little bit deeper into the year, there will be a transition of Jupiter from one sign to another. There will be a transition of Uranus from one sign to another. There will be a transition of Saturn from one sign to another. And there'll be a transition of Neptune from one sign to another. Now, in the case of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they will go back into the previous sign before the year ends. And then the next year, in 2026, they will go into the next sign and stay in there permanently. But it is literally going to be a year of disruptions, which I think is also following on the tail end of Pluto making its transition out of Capricorn and permanently now in Aquarius. So there's just a lot going on in the sky that we're actually seeing in the world, and a lot of it has to do with significant disruption. And unfortunately, each of the positions that three of the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, occupy during this transition phase are all tied to major wars or major moments in history in which the world was transformed in some significant way. And those were happening as separate events in the history. One happening during the Revolutionary War, one happening during the Civil War, one happening during World War II. And now we've got them all compressed around the same time. And then Saturn is in the mix, also wanting to change signs. So, generally speaking, it's definitely wild times. I mean, it's very wild times, without a doubt. So, for each of us, we're going to be dealing with it in our own unique way based on how our charts interact with where the points are. As an example, in my story, the sixth house, which deals with my day-to-day work, my health, my routines, that's ruled by Aries. So, where Venus and Mercury happen to be and go retrograde is going to be affecting me in that area of my story. So again, while the cosmic weather is really meant to give you some idea of general energy, of course, the best thing is to get it and apply it to your own chart. And certainly a month-to-month look is worthwhile, especially with points like Mercury and Venus, which move fairly quickly. And you can see what that can mean for you in terms of where those points are in your chart and what they mean when they go retrograde. So, just generally speaking, the idea that Mercury in Aries is direct energy and communication, honesty, openness, But the shadow side of it, of course, is it isn't always the most diplomatic. It's kind of like I'm thinking and I'm saying it, and sometimes that isn't what we need to do. So the retrograde energy to me is an opportunity to kind of reel that energy back in a little bit and assess things while you're still trying to get to the truth of things, and you still want to be honest and open. But I guess in some ways you could say the retrograde with Aries can create a little bit of diplomacy, but it also means that as you're dealing with relationships, could mean some pretty serious house cleaning. And, Aries energy is the beginning of the zodiac. So it's always the thing that's new that needs to be dealt with. And Pisces, which is the sign it will go back into, and then of course it has recently left, that deals with endings and wrapping things up. It's the last sign of the zodiac. So I would say, in terms of what we're going to be dealing with energetically, these two retrogrades are by far and away the most significant to pay attention to. And so, that being said, we really have to understand in many ways that projections into the future in terms of trying to anticipate specific outcomes or count on things to be a certain way have been really disrupted and are going to be even more heavily disrupted when Neptune gets its first taste of Aries, which will be actually on March the 30th. So at the end of this month, Neptune will move into the sign of Aries. And again, there's going to be this sort of rush to get things done a certain way or to try to leap into things. But it's also going to represent a bit of a clarity in terms of the direction that Neptune representing beliefs will settle into or be aligned to, that is very different than the Piscean energy. Neptune rules Pisces, and Pisces energy is very hard to pin down. It's about surrender, it's about faith, it's about beliefs and visions and ideas, but it's all like, how do you implement these things? These are, big energies that Pisces represents. It represents the global consciousness. Once it hits Aries, it's going to be a tighter focus as to, well, what do we really need to deal with? And some of it's going to be based on another quality of Aries, which is survival. So I think the sense of, what's going to feel like survival energy when Neptune hits that Aries energy is going to really rise up to the top. And so I'm certainly seeing it in my work individually with clients where a lot of people are very much worried about the future, but really also the present, because what's happening in the present is likely to change dramatically what people thought the future might look like based on patterns that existed really kind of up until COVID came on the scene, but also because of Pluto going through Capricorn and being the return for the United States, meaning that when the United States was created, Pluto was in Capricorn. So it's had a return, it's come back to itself, which usually means a revolution or a disruption. And Capricorn's work is to ferret out where things are failing as systems. And in those systems, they are meant to either collapse or in some way be restructured in a deep and profound way. It can also introduce new structures as well. So what we'll see with March is going to be, with the retrograde energy, kind of a pause and thinking, but also while at the same time things are rushing by very quickly. It's a very interesting sort of conundrum, if you will, in terms of how these energies are going to be operating. Now, in terms of sort of taking a look at things from week to week, which is what I like to do, and sort of give people a thought of how energy will play out, then when we start the month here, the first day today, we're actually going to have some carryover energy from a relationship or an aspecting between 2 points in the sky that started back in February, actually on the 28th, as a matter of fact. And that is Saturn, which is currently in Pisces, forming what's called a sextile or complementary relationship with Uranus in Taurus. And so this does have to represent a period of blending the discipline of Saturn with the innovation of Uranus. But the energies that are involved is Saturn is in Pisces, which is like, it's just huge. I mean, Pisces is like the ocean. And to try to figure out how you're going to apply Saturn to the ocean is it's limiting. I mean, it's just there's more Pisces than there is Saturn, kind of a way of putting it. And then the other side of it is Uranus is in a sign, Taurus, that it's not particularly fond of in a way. Uranus is breakthrough energy. It's pushing for the new, and Taurus is tradition and keeping things the way they are. So this energy, in order for it to be really utilized in a positive way, does require a lot of very conscious decision making. However, if there's unconscious decision making going on, this energy is still at work. And it does mean that there's going to be, practical and creative solutions being applied, but how effective they'll be based on the fact that these energies are dealing with some dissonance, some difficulty within them. Saturn certainly enjoys connecting with Taurus, and Uranus is actually pretty comfortable connecting with Pisces. They'd be doing probably a little bit better if they were in those signs switched, right? In other words, if we were talking about the sextile with Uranus in Pisces and Saturn in Taurus, I think there would be a better flow of the energy. So I think what we're going to see actually is a little bit more of kind of hacking at it and hoping for the best. I think that's what we're going to kind of have as an energy that will apply all the way through until the end of April. So this particular transit is going to be in effect all of March and all of April. Now, in the second week of March, we're going to have Mars, which is in Cancer, and it's going to square up with Chiron in Aries. And that's going to be from March 9th all the way through to April the 3rd. And this is going to be a challenging energy. So we're looking at, tension around emotional security and self-assertion. So Mars is the assertion energy. Cancer wants things to feel secure. Chiron is a wound. Aries is maverick energy. So the square is going to challenge all of us to confront past pain and try to do it courageously, finding the strength in how we're going to deal with our vulnerability and our feeling of vulnerability. And I think, again, this is going to be a very telling kind of energy with what we're watching with regard to the disruption in the economy, inflation, world events. All of this is going to make us feel, and probably we've been feeling it for quite some time, actually. I mean, this is not new energy, but it's going to come into focus with this particular aspecting of these 2 points. Now, again, that's going to run all the way until the beginning of April, April the 3rd. So it'll start in the second week of March, but it will run until April the 3rd. Now, the other thing that's going to happen in the next week, so March 16th to 23rd, that week of energy, we're going to have Mars actually still in Cancer, but it's going to form a trine or collaborate with Saturn in Pisces. So now we're going to get water energy kind of lining up, and that's going to be on March 19th, and it's going to carry all the way over until April the 10th. And what this energy is going to do for us is it's going to encourage patience, which we're going to need a lot of, and perseverance, which we're going to need a lot of, and strategic efforts towards whatever long-term goals are going to be. Now, that's going to be reflected in, all countries. It's going to be reflected in communities, states, and it's going to come all the way down to us as individuals. And this particular trine is trying to encourage that emotional resilience that we're going to need to navigate the challenges with a sense of maturity and wisdom. So the hope for quick fixes, I appreciate. I certainly love a quick fix if there can be one. But a lot of what we're going to see is that promises for quick fixes won't really match up with the complexity of the problems. And so this energy is going to start really sort of, in a way, connecting us to the idea that, hey, the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves in our private lives, to help the people we care about, to do things professionally, to be part of our community, to be part of our state, to be part of our society. It's going to require a lot more energy and effort to get new alignment and to get into a space where we can feel we're headed in a direction that is generally good for the largest number of people. Not a small number of people, but for the largest number of people. So this is very good energy. It's just a matter of whether or not it can be tapped into. And that's something I've learned in doing astrology is that when I usually explain it to people, I talk to them about there being 5 keys to astrology. 4 of those keys involve data. So, for example, the data here is Mars is a data point, Cancer is a data point. You put them together, they create information. Then the trine or aspect is a data point. It's connecting with another point, which happens to be Saturn and Pisces. And then we say something about it. But then there's the free will part. The 5th key is always free will. What do we decide to do with it or not do with it? when that energy is available. Sometimes we miss a window of opportunity. Sometimes we completely embrace the window of opportunity. Now, the final week in March, that is going to include one more sort of connection with Mars. Mars is the one that's doing kind of all the work here in this month, and certainly did a lot of the work in the previous month. But it's going to form a sextile with Uranus and Taurus, and again, that's a complementary kind of energy. That's going to start on March the 25th and go all the way through April the 10th. So this sextile is going to try to encourage us to take bold, intuitive steps. So the bold is Mars, the intuitive is Pisces. So the bold, intuitive steps, and that's going to be embracing spontaneity while trying to stay emotionally grounded. So the spontaneity is Uranus, Taurus is the emotional grounding and the practicality. A lot of what I would offer that is going to be a theme that will really be resonant throughout this year and is really part of a larger theme going all the way back to 2020. And for me, I feel like we're not going to be kind of on the other side of this theme until 2029. The duration is really lengthy, but the theme is that we're going to have to learn to do things differently for ourselves. We're going to have to figure out how do we recognize what our patterns are and realize that we've got to change and do things that will be outside of our comfort zone because we're in an uncomfortable environment. And this uncomfortable environment is actually a product of choices that were patterned a certain way before the kinds of disruptions, starting with COVID, but continuing with economic issues and so forth, still in play. So the problem that we face then is how do we start shaping ourselves into this brand new world that we really don't know what the shape of it's going to be fully yet. It's so much is in flux right now. So I tend to find the retrograde energy can be really useful if you're understanding that it's meant to slow down. So usually when I explain retrograde, I do it using speed limit. And the idea is that retrograde is not about something actually moving backwards. The explanation is that you have two bodies going in the same direction, and one's faster than the other, and the faster one is looking over at the slower one, and as it passes by, it appears that the slower one is moving backwards. It's not actually, but that's the effect. But in terms of what retrograde means when it comes into effect, I use a speed limit example. So when you're driving down the highway, that's direct energy, 65 miles per hour, you're cruising along. When points go retrograde, it's a change in the speed limit, and it drops to what would be a citywide speed limit, in most cases 35 miles per hour. The problem comes when you want to drive 65 in a 35 zone. It's not that you can't sign contracts, travel, any of those things under a Mercury retrograde. It's not that you can't start a new relationship under a Venus retrograde. It's not that you can't initiate an action or do something competitive under a Mars retrograde. It's that you have to understand that that energy needs to be handled differently. And if you handle it in the correct way differently, then you have all of the things you can accomplish just like you would if it was direct motion. So retrograde is not an energy that is negative. It is an energy that is required to have periods of reflection that applies to all of the points starting with Mercury and going up to Pluto. So while we deal with retrograde energy, we are supposed to be reflective. We are supposed to be more patient and all of those things that will help us get through a period of energy that can be, in many ways, quite challenging. So, what I would offer is that it is definitely a very volatile time, and it's not going to be any less volatile because the year with these transitions that are coming up and these plants moving into new signs and then going back into the old signs and then finally moving back into the new signs, it really is a hold on to your hat, kind of do the best you can. And with hopefully this information that I'm providing you, you'll be aware of knowing that it's really very much a day-to-day kind of circumstance. And then if you do want to dig in and do some research on your own chart, or you would like to work with me with regard to your own chart, that would be a great way to get a better understanding of how specifically those energies are working for you and how you can work with them to get the best results that you can. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of keep this one a little bit shorter and a little more direct. I do want to again reemphasize that Neptune, not Neptune, but Venus, does go retrograde every 2 years. So this is the one of the years it's retrograde. It will be retrograde the entire period of March. Mercury will start its first retrograde, last 3 weeks, and then we'll have two more retrogrades to go. So that energy is absolutely in play right now. There's a lot of energy for potential value and getting things done, but also these energies are very mixed. They're very much kind of struggling with one another. So it's very easy for things to go astray as well. And here's the weird thing about it is because the energy is flowing, a sextile is a complementary energy. If things go astray, they can go astray very quickly because the flowing energy is actually just about the flow. It isn't about being good or bad, it's that it flows. So if there is something being done that is not really beneficial, it will flow in a not beneficial way really effectively. So, keeping in mind that we really need to be cognizant of our choices and try to understand that the flowing energy will move things along. And so it's very important to really do the best you can to make wise and thoughtful and informed decisions. So I do hope these videos help. And of course, if you think this would be good for someone to know, please share this video with other people and have, as best possible, a great March.